Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Infuse Your Future podcast, where we bring together people and ideas who are making the world a better place. Today, I have a pretty important guy with me, Brad Nelson. He has a podcast and a company called Debt Free Dad, which I think we can all use and strive for. So I'd love to introduce Brad and ask him to tell us a little bit about who he is, what he does, and how he infuses the future.
Yeah,
Hi,
thanks,
Brad.
Carla. Appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here today and to talk about this really, man, difficult topic for a lot of people, which is money, personal finance. And so a little bit about me. I struggled with a lot of personal finance issues, very, very much like most people do today, living paycheck to paycheck. Didn't have a lot of money in savings. Really struggled with debt and payments, and it wasn't so much of an income issue, so to speak. I always felt like I was able to figure out a way to make a decent amount of money, even though I don't really have a super sophisticated college education or anything like that. But I always did well working and climbing the ranks of whatever employment I was at, and always made a decent income. But it just never seemed like it was ever enough, right? It seemed like the more money I made, it's like it just really didn't make any difference for some reason. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can probably resonate with that feeling too. And so back in my late 20s and early 30s, I just got kind of tired of this paycheck to paycheck rat race, all the time. And I realized very quickly, it's like, nothing's getting better. I'm stressing about money all the time. I'm not sleeping. I'm worried about money at work. It was a problem in my, first relationship and marriage. And just, it just was this constant struggle. And so my first marriage sadly ended in divorce. There were multiple reasons behind that, but money did play a role in that. And we ended up losing the house that we were living in because it was during the 2010 kind of housing bust that happened. And we lost our house to foreclosure. And because neither one of us could afford the payment because we had purchased at such a high price, and then the housing prices started to, collapse, and we couldn't sell it. We just couldn't sell it for what we owed, and we just had to walk away from it. And that to me was a big wake up call and made me realize like how much of a house of cards I built when it came to my financial life. And I had a 2-year-old son, Noah, at the time. And I just, at that was just kind of the moment for me where it's like, okay, I got to start figuring out how to do this stuff. So I really just made a commitment to myself. Like I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to start doing anything I can to learn about money. So I started reading books, started listening to podcasts, started taking courses and seminars, and it didn't matter who was necessarily teaching it. I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to figure out like what was I doing wrong, because I was doing it the way that they say you do it. Have a good credit score, be responsible with making your payments. I was always responsible with making my payments, but things just weren't clicking. It's like, man, I'm doing everything they say, but I don't have any money. I don't have any money to invest or anything like that. And what I realized after I started, learning about this stuff is that I kind of had it wrong. When I was doing a lot of things wrong, I was actually living with this herd mentality of this paycheck to paycheck life and consumerism and spend it all now and you only live once. And I realized very, very quickly, it's like, okay, I really got to change my mindset. And so once I started practicing some of these um, simple concepts, really, so to speak, amazingly things got better, which is crazy to think. And it took me a good 4 to 5 years to get out of debt, completely out of debt. I paid off about between $45,000 to $50,000 in debt, and I've been debt free now for 10 plus years outside of my mortgage. And when I was getting out of debt, crazy enough, it was never like a goal for me to run a business or open a business like this. I really got out of debt for the same reasons that other people got out of debt. And but the reality is that when people started finding out what I was doing and I was talking about it, I was sharing my experience, I was talking to coworkers and friends and family and just saying, this stuff has been like life-changing for me. I have no more credit card debt. I actually have money in the bank. I'm finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to be debt free outside of my rent or my mortgage. Like, this is exciting stuff. And people actually started kind of coming out of the woodwork behind closed doors and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this stuff too. Like, what did you do? I have credit card problems. I'm struggling with student loans. My wife and I aren't really agreeing on money. Like, what are you doing in order to get these types of results? And so I just started helping people on the side. Wasn't doing it for money. I just was doing it just, hey, I learned this stuff. I just wanted to share with other people. And it really started to help those people, and it began to change their lives. And that's what I eventually fell in love with, was not so much the money part of it, because I don't really care so much about that, but it's It's what having control over your money does to the rest of your life. It's that ripple effect, right? And that's what I fell in love with, was helping people get to that point where I was experiencing such a much happier and stress-free life, because money is just, I mean, right now, 73% of Americans say that the number one source of stress and anxiety in their life is their money. And I didn't have that any longer. And I just wanted to help other people get to that point. And that's really the main purpose of Debt Free Dad, is we are normal, everyday people. And we're out here helping normal, everyday people, middle income earners, higher income earners, and changing their financial mindset, and getting to that point where they can live stress-free from a financial life.
Yeah, it's so important. I feel like we live in a culture where debt is almost encouraged,
Oh, for sure.
and they make it so easy to get a credit card, and they're pushing the message, like you said, that you have to buy, live now, and we don't teach finances in school. Kids are young when they really need to learn it. And so we just have this whole culture. There's a whole group of investors that the way they get rich is off of debt.
Correct. Yep. It is. I feel probably the most successfully marketed product ever created. I really do believe that. And, the marketing of debt is just so good. It is almost fascinating to me how good they are at it, and how they can actually get somebody to go into a store or go online and not only spend money that they didn't plan on spending, but spend money that they don't even have by going into debt for things that they probably don't even need. And that's just, I mean, you mentioned just how easy it is. And I think that's another thing, that's another challenge, because, we talk about education. We need more education about personal finance. We do, but we also need more education on just like patience, and how do you deal with emotional type purchasing and habits, and how does the rest of your life play into some of those decisions, and the psychological side of money, because it's not just about numbers and math. Because if I'm having a bad day, or even a good day, so to speak, what do? We either say, I want to make myself feel good and go spend some money because I just want to go out, make myself feel better. I need to treat myself, right? Or, hey, I had something good happen. Let's go out and do what? Spend money. Let's go out to eat. Let's celebrate, right? It's always kind of that next, it's always there. Money is always there. It's always a part of how we live our life. And so it's not just about interest rates and, credit scores and dollars and cents and numbers. It really is. There is an emotional and holistic side to money and personal finance that we really need to be taught and understand how it all kind of fits together.
Right. Now, congratulations in becoming debt free. You
I
said it
appreciate
took
that.
about 4 or 5 years. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk about a little bit of the specifics of how you went from a life where the money was just draining out of the bathtub, like a lot of us, to where you have a debt-free life that's much more comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, my first recommendation, and I guess it's hard for me to share my exact journey because it was messy, and that's one of the reasons why we created Debt Free Dad and our membership site, which is called Roots, is to give people more of a streamlined process and an environment that really pushes people to work the process and give them accountability and support along the way. Because when I was getting out of debt, I didn't really have any of that. Sure, I had these books and I had some of these, some of these tools and things that were out there, but I didn't really have anyone sitting with me or hopping on a Zoom call with me and working through some of this stuff with me. I was literally out there on my own. So my whole kind of journey was just all over the place. And the reality is that it took me much longer, 4 or 5 years, to pay off $45,000 to $50,000. I mean, I've got people that we help that are crushing my numbers. They're just destroying me. And a big part of that is because of this whole support system and process that we have in place that allows people to streamline the process so they can skip a lot of the, I guess, roadblocks and probably challenges that I saw and faced, but I had to figure out on my own. And so, what I would tell most people is, like, when you're getting started, first and foremost, you really want to set yourself up for success. And what a lot of people will tend to do is they say, well, I have to pay off debt. And they immediately just focus on, how can I pay down this debt? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing to do, but we really need to figure out, like, what got you there to begin with, right? Because what you're facing didn't happen overnight in most cases. It was a combination of probably a lot of poor financial decisions over the years that eventually got you to where you are. right? So we want to kind of backtrack and go all the way back to the beginning. And one of the best ways to do that is just, if you're listening to this podcast episode right now and you're one of these people who's like, I'm struggling and I'm not sure where to get started, one of the best things you can do is, once this is over, go on to your bank statements, go on to your credit card statements, go on to PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, anywhere you're spending money. Even if you're using cash, start keeping receipts and go back over the last 3 to 6 months, maybe even 12 months, if you're an overachiever, and see where you've been spending your money. And this is a very eye-opening task for so many people. Carl, I've taught thousands of people to do this, and I haven't had one person come back to me ever and say, Brad, I went and did what you said, and I wasn't surprised by what I found at all. I knew exactly what was going to be there. And it's always the opposite. It's, Brad, I went and did what you did or what you said, and I'm sick to my stomach. I can't believe that I was spending money on this, or how much money we were spending on that, or I'm spending money on these things, and I'm not even using these things. I didn't even know that money was coming out of my account. So I think for a lot of people, and this is happening still to this day, even people who are making middle incomes, people who are saying inflation is the reason why they're struggling. They come talk to us. We start working with them. And lo and behold, almost every single time, there's money sitting right there at their feet that can help them and project them forward in their financial lives. They're just not being intentional with the way that they're using that money. And so this is an opportunity when you first get started, is to really look at, okay, what gets us into trouble? What are the areas that we need to kind of focus on as far as our behaviors, habits, and choices? What are some areas that, we know that we're overspending in? And then what are some areas that we can, cut back in? What are some areas that we're willing to sacrifice altogether? And what are some areas that we want to keep? Because, hey, we have to also enjoy life a little bit too. And then what are some areas that we need to shop around? Maybe it's some services, maybe we're paying too high of a price. Maybe we need to look at and see if we can get the best deal, or if we're getting the best deal. So it's a combination of doing some of those things when you're getting started to kind of figure out where exactly you're at to begin with, right? And for a lot of people, I think the first hump you got to get over is when a lot of people start getting out of debt, they feel like they have to cut everything out of their life. And the reality is for most people, you don't have to cut everything out. Now, do you have to make some sacrifices? Yes. Without sacrifice, there is no moving forward in a lot of cases, right? When I was getting out of debt, I got rid of a brand new car and I drove a 1996 Toyota Corolla for about 4 or 5 years. That was not a fun sacrifice to make, but I got to tell you, ditching that $500 car payment over those 4 to 5 years made a significant difference in being able to save more money and pay down a lot of debt over those years as well. And I look back at that and say that was one of the single best things that I've ever did. And I can contribute getting rid of that car is a big reason as to why I was able to get out of debt and remain debt free now for all these years, because I still don't have a car payment to this day.
That's awesome. A lot of times too, it's not even the big purchases, right? When I started looking more at my own spending habits, I realized I was probably spending over $30 a month on soda. You swing by the gas station, grab a soda. It's only a couple of bucks. Now, of course, it's over $3 just to get one soda at a gas station. But you add that up over 30 days and it becomes significant.
Yep.
And, I just had a text the other day for some app that apparently I signed up for last year that was on auto renew. And all of a sudden, $66, and I've never even used it.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So finding these little apps that you sign up for and getting rid of the auto renewal, it all adds up to hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah. It's death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Right.
Yep. And that's kind of the way it is. And you're right. It isn't always the really big things that are the cause. It's sometimes just those little holes that are in your bucket that are leaking all of the money out. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do with, anything aside that I share with on this episode is one of the things you can do, just become ultimately aware, is look back at your spending, start being more aware of where that money is going. We shared this statistic recently on our podcast, but upwards of 50% of millennials have no idea what's in their bank account right now. 50%. It's half of a whole generation.
Pretty amazing.
And I'm sure that probably goes across all of the generations, knowing what I know with working people from all different age groups. It's not just the millennials, it's people from all different age groups, And so, they're 63% of people right now can't cover a $500 emergency expense. And, it's interesting when you see some of these statistics, because these articles now today will blame, say, things like inflation. Well, if you go back and actually look at the statistics from 2017, they were very much the same exact statistics. It was 63% back in 2017. It's 63% in 2023. Well, that was pre-COVID and pre-inflation, right? So
Right.
if inflation is the reason, well, what was the excuse back in 2017? And the reality is that we're just really poor savers when it comes to us here in the United States. We're just not very good at it statistically. So yeah, I mean, I think it really kind of comes down to just really getting down to the ground level of, okay, what is causing all of this stuff? Okay. We have to have some accountability in this because, right now, if you watch TikTok or if you're on Facebook Reels or anything like that, there's a lot of people saying like, how are people affording life right now? And the reality is it is tough right now. I'm not saying that it isn't. Things are expensive. Groceries are expensive. They definitely are. But nowhere in those videos does anyone ever say like, but what did I do to contribute to where I am today right now? See, we're really good at pointing the finger at everybody else, no matter who's in the White House, who your boss is, what job you're working at, the amount of money you're making. Like, we'll blame everything else. And I'm not saying that those things don't contribute because they do to a certain extent, but the number one contribution to your financial success or financial failure is you. And, until we're ready to take that accountability and say, what can I do? Or number one, what did I do to cause this? But then let's spend more time on what can I do to get out of it? And what do I have control over? Because if you spend all this time pointing the finger at everything else that you have no control over, you're going to be stuck in the same spot next year and the year after that and the year after that until you're ready to say like, hey, what are the things that I can control? What are the things that I can do? And let's focus on those things. And we're not going to worry about everything else. We're just going to deal with it and take it on as it comes. And the reality is like when you focus on the things that you can control, it allows you to control more of the things that you can't. Like, for instance, yeah, for me and my household, inflation is tough right now. Things are more expensive. I'm a single dad. My wife sadly passed away back in March. This is about 9-10 months ago. So I'm just getting used to a single income household, but I'm debt free. But things are so expensive right now, but yet I'm not struggling because I am debt free. So I've afforded myself the ability to fluctuate my budget as needed in order to accommodate these higher costs. Now, does that mean other things have to be sacrificed in order to do that? Well, sure, but I'm still paying my bills. I'm not worried at night. I'm not losing sleep. Things are okay. And I know that as this storm passes, which it eventually will, we'll come out on the other side pretty unscathed and we'll be able to get back to the normal way of living that we were accustomed to before, inflation, all that stuff happened. So it allows you to just kind of bend and flex with the things that are happening outside of your, outside of, the things that you can choose to deal with, right? You have to like focus on what you can deal with and what you can handle. Focus on those things you can control. And the more you do that, the better your financial life will be. But man, it's so frustrating right now because there's so many people just out there pointing the finger at everybody else right now. And we got to look inside to say, what can we do to fix this?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really the best message to go home with and to really think about. And you mentioned that that's one of the things that you really like to talk about is transforming financial habits. And that's really what it comes down to is what are our own financial habits? Are we buying a Starbucks coffee every morning? Or are we, getting a big can of coffee at Costco and making our own coffee at home for pennies on the dollar?
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I read a book called Automatic Millionaire.
Oh yeah.
Automating savings. And he would say, people say they have no money to save, but they're spending $10 on Starbucks a day. And like you said, you don't necessarily have to cut it out, but maybe cut it down to once a week or once a month instead of every day, because these little purchases that seem like nothing add up so fast.
Correct. And that is what we see a lot with our members is that even those individuals who are, struggling living paycheck to paycheck, it isn't just the coffee. It's typically the coffee and then a bunch of other things. Right. And again, I know that there's people out there who claim that I swear, I don't spend anymore. And that's fine. If that's you, that's fine. But in my experience and working with a lot of people who say that, and then we ask them to go do the work that we ask them to go do, they come back and they say, wow, I realized that there is actually quite a bit more money there than I thought that there was. And I really wasn't being honest with myself. And so, yes, I'm not one of these people or these, I don't even like to call myself a finance expert, so to speak, but these finance experts out there that are like, you got to cut everything out of your life in order to get out of debt. And I'm not a fan of that approach. I feel that sets you up for a lot of self-sabotage because it's hard for most of us to live that kind of life, where you're cutting everything out, especially if you got kids, right? That's
Oh,
really
right.
hard, you know. So I'm more of like, okay, let's go through, like I just asked you guys to do, go look at your expenses. And now let's seriously just consider those. Okay, we have those all written down. So now I want you to ask yourself, when it comes to your habits, behaviors, and choices, what do you want? What do you really want in your financial life? Does you want less financial stress? If so, like, what does that look like to you? Like, what does less financial stress mean? Does it mean that you have an emergency fund savings? Does it mean you have less debt? Does it mean you have a certain amount of extra money every single month to do something extra with? Like, what does less financial stress or financial health or financial freedom even, what does that really mean to you? All right. Because answering that question allows you to start setting up some smaller, I would even call them maybe micro financial goals that you will believe in, because it's your version of what financial freedom is. I know that there's a lot of people out there who say, there's a couple of different definitions of financial freedom, but after asking people, like, what does financial freedom mean to you? It means something different to all of us. And what's only important is what it means to you. And you have to set up your financial goals to help you reach your version of what financial freedom is. For some people, financial freedom to them is just, I don't want to have any credit cards. Like, I'm okay having a car payment, okay having a mortgage, but I just don't want to have any credit card debt. For some people, it's like me. They don't want to have any debt outside of their mortgage. And for some people, it's even more extreme. They don't want to have any debt at all, including their mortgage. Right. So, I mean, you have to kind of determine and pick what that's going to be. But then by setting up some of these micro goals, then you can go back to your expense list that you've now totaled over these last 3 to 6 months or these last 12 months and ask yourself, is this spending helping us reach this kind of life that we want to live? And obviously, for most of us, the answer is going to be no. So then we go back to the expense list and we're going to go through that and reprioritize that list from most important to least important. And then we're going to say, how much money do we have coming in every month? And then we're going to go down that list of things and say, okay, this is how much money we got coming in every month. This is the most important expense to the least important expense. And now we're going to spend in that order based on the life that we eventually want to have in our financial life. And we're going to go through and spend that money. And when we get to the end and that money runs out, the stuff that's on the bottom of that list, it's gone. Because the reality is you're never going to get out of debt if you're living a life way over your income, right? And you're affording that, say, with debt or credit cards and payments and things like that. You eventually have got to draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to use debt any longer, at least until we can get ourselves to a much better situation where we're not feeling the pain that we're feeling right now. So I think when it comes to behaviors, habits, and choices, a lot of it comes down to just having something more important to work towards. And for a lot of us who are living paycheck to paycheck, we're just surviving in a lot of ways. We're just playing defense all the time. And when we're just surviving and we're just playing defense all the time, it's easy just to say, like, well, what's the point of doing a budget? What's the point? Nothing ever works. I am going to go out and treat myself tonight, even though I probably know I don't have the money. I'm still going to go do it anyways. The friends ask me out. I'm still going to go do it anyways, because I just need to feel good, because my life just, financial life's just terrible and life is hard right now. But when you start setting up these goals of, okay, this is what my life could look like if I'm willing to make some changes, it makes you think twice, sometimes even 3 times about, is this stuff that I want to do worth it to keep me away from the life over here that I really, really want? And so that you almost start to create like a buying filter for your life of, when you see a purchase or something that has you emotionally ready to buy it, like, oh, like see something on Amazon, right? Or you go to Target, whatever, you're in that moment, right? And they're so good at getting you to buy something. All of a sudden, well, no, we've been working on these financial goals. Is this purchase worth keeping me away from those? Is this going to push me further away from those goals? Or is it, if I say no, I'm going to be closer to my goal? Is it worth it for me? And see, if we don't have that, it's so easy just to be an emotional spender, an impulse purchaser, and say, I'm just going to buy it to make me feel good. There was this statistic that I saw in, it's on, I believe it's still on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's still on there or not. It's by the Minimalists, and they had a statistic in there. The average home has over 300,000 items in it, which is unbelievable to me. 300,000 items. And so, a lot of us, we're these, we're and I used to be one too, emotional or impulsive purchaser. And I still deal with it to this day because I'm human, right? But we collect all of these things in that moment of, it makes me feel good. And then all of a sudden it just becomes something else that's in your house that really does nothing for you. And then, you're stuck in just this constant hamster wheel of financial turmoil over and over again. So I think, like, to answer your question about habits choices, I think a lot of it comes down to reevaluating where you're at, thinking about where you want to be, and then what can we change based on where we're at to help us get to where we want to go.
Yeah, so true. Now, you were talking about your friends trying to entice you into coming out and
Oh yeah.
going out to dinner or partying. And I know one of the other things you like to talk about is navigating financial conversations. And I find this so important, and I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, because I know, I mean, when I grew up, we really didn't talk about finances. I mean, my mom talked about savings because back in her day, it was worth it to keep all your money in savings. She didn't know anything about investing. My dad didn't do any investing. But when I started talking about finances, nobody wanted to do it. Like, it was just a black wall. I'm trying to start up conversations about saving, investing, just money in general, and nobody wanted to talk about it. And especially when we are trying to make changes and we're with a group that we normally are with that have kind of the same habits, it's going to kind of disrupt things a little bit, and it's going to make the friendships or the relationships a little bit different, and sometimes that's not going to feel good. So I'd be interested in hearing what you say about it, and I would imagine that's kind of why you have a community that supports people going through the same thing together, so that people can have other people to talk about the things they need to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. This was probably one of the most eye-opening things for me in my journey of getting out of debt, was the lack of support from other people. I was shocked. I was shocked. And I think, in today's, coming up on, it's gonna be soon to be 2024. I think the whole idea of debt freedom, financial freedom is a much more talked about topic than, say, it was back in 2010 when I started doing this. I feel like the conversation has opened up, which is good. But when I was getting out of debt, I mean, people looked at me like I had three eyes. Wait, what? You're trying to do what? Like, wait, you're trying to be debt free. Who does that? I mean, you're always going to have a credit card. I mean, how do you drive a car without a car payment? Like, you're always, I mean, that's just a normal thing. I mean, what are you trying to do here? Right. I mean, people really thought I was that nuts when I said I just didn't want to do this anymore. And it was really hard because when you start looking at, okay, we talked about these goals, right? And then you get asked to do certain things that you were accustomed to being a part of, right? Whether it be going out with your friends or going to a concert or participating in things that cost money. And now all of a sudden you have to, like, draw the line in the sand and say, guys, that's just not in the budget. Wow, do people take offense to that? they really do. And what I started to realize, though, is that it wasn't me. It was them projecting themselves onto me because they felt guilty, because they too knew that they had to clean up a lot of their financial messes as well. One of the biggest people that argued with me to this day was my brother, Ryan. And I remember I was at his house on Thanksgiving. This was when I was kind of just in the beginning of the journey of getting out of debt. And we argued tooth and nail for hours about this, about being debt free. It's impossible. It's never going to happen. And I left that Thanksgiving holiday with saying, I'm going to prove him wrong one day. I became debt free. And crazy enough, my brother now works for Debt Free Dad.
Wow.
and he too is debt free. After 8 years on his journey outside of his mortgage, he too is debt free. And he's now on our podcast. He's a co-host on our podcast. He was one of the biggest doubters of all of this. And I always say, if I can get my brother on the train, if I can get him on, I can get anybody on this train.
Right,
so,
right.
So the reality is, though, is you're not gonna, there's gonna be people that are gonna be unhappy with your decisions to improve your life. And I don't care what that looks like. If it's health, if it's money, if it's toxic relationships that just, are very one-sided and you're putting your foot down, you're never going to make everybody happy. I mean, I did lose relationships. My relationships did suffer because I had to make some different decisions with my finances. Some of those relationships were with some good friends where we would go out on a regular basis, hang out, but that usually involved spending money and spending money that I didn't have. And I knew, like, if I wanted this bad enough, I had to cut that stuff out, or I was just going to be constantly stuck in this cycle, and I needed to do that. And so I had to cut it out. Now, were there other things that we were able to do and kind of work around that? Yes, absolutely. But I think you do have to get to the point where you have to look at your life, your finances, and make that, yes, I know relationships are important, but you need to make that a priority over and above that relationship. And if that relationship is a good one, that person will be willing to accommodate and support you on your mission to become debt free. And they'll look for other ways. Like, for instance, like, hey, instead of spending money, why don't you just come over and we'll hang out and just do something that's really super inexpensive? We'll talk to your friends. And the ones that unfortunately aren't going to buy in, the reality is they're probably not as good of a friend as you thought that they were. The ones that are the good friends are going to be the ones that don't care if you have to go out and spend a ton of money to do those types of things. And going to, the way you kind of brought up this part of the conversation today as it relates to your kids, conversations in the household. I think you bring up a valid point. I think, money is a very shameful topic. I still think for a lot of people, it still is a very shameful topic in the household. I don't feel like it is probably talked about nearly as much as it should be, but because money and personal finance, majority wise here in the United States, isn't being taught in schools yet. Our goal is to hopefully get it taught in more schools and then hopefully in every school. But the reality is more of that education also needs to be given at home. We can't just figure out, hey, you kids need to learn about money at school. Well, no, they learn about it by watching us as parents manage money. How do you talk about money? Is it we're always broke, we're always struggling? Do they hear, collections calling? What type of environment financially are you building at your home that your kids are watching? Because, they are going to watch more than they're, and learn more by watching you than actually you just telling them what to do. They're going to see when you're at the store, if you're, applying for debt and swiping credit cards and all of those types of things, right? So I think we do need to have this conversation at home. And a lot of people and a lot of parents might say, well, I don't know what to teach. Well, that's a sign that then it's time to go do some self-education, because we got to teach our kids this stuff. I mean, if you think about it, if you've been struggling most of your life with money, what's going to stop them? And the reality is, this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to get my financial life figured out, is because I knew at that time I had a 2-year-old son named Noah. I was like, I'm a terrible example at this point, and I do not want him to struggle like I struggled. And I knew firsthand I needed to take responsibility for this and say, I need to do better for him. I need to figure this out so I can teach him and at least give him a chance. He can decide what he wants to do. If he wants to go in debt, still fine. But hey, I at least taught you the things that you should do to be successful. Whether you take those or not, that's going to be up to you when you become an adult. But at least I knew as a parent, like, I gave you all the tools to be successful. I showed you how this stuff works. And I think, as parents, we do need to take on that responsibility, and it's a big one. But I think, a lot of us tend to put a lot more pressure on ourselves than there needs to be, because a lot of it can be taught in just basic personal finance habits that we're doing and, going through every day. Like, talk about your budget with your kids. This is a big one, especially when you got kids that are teenagers. Man, they think the money just never runs out. They do. They just think the money never runs out. So, sit down and have a look at your monthly budget with them. Hey, this is the money we have coming in. This is how much money we bring into the house. These are all of our bills and expenses. So you like living here? This is how much it costs to live here. You like the lights on? This is how much it costs to keep these lights on. Make your kids aware of how expensive it is to live. Show them. In a lot of cases, a lot of people say, well, my kids just don't appreciate anything. Well, when's the last time you sat them down and showed them what it takes to run your household? And a lot of us don't really take that time to show them. We tell them you should appreciate it because it's expensive. Well, they're kids. They don't really associate that just yet, right? But, show them. Or when they get a job, start working with them on basic budgeting principles. Like, hey, we're going to save 15% of your money. We're going to put that in a savings account. Or, hey, even crazy enough, go up and open a kid's Roth IRA for them. Get them started on retirement early. Have them start putting money into an investment account. Start teaching them some of these things. Show them, hey, there's going to be some expenses that you're going to need to take care of, even as a teenager. We're going to make you responsible for a few things so they can get into the habit of, okay, I need to put money away or budget money for these upcoming things. My son's going to go to Washington, D.C. in the spring, and he's going to be a big part of making that happen. We're going to help him a little bit, but he's going to come up with the money mostly on his own. So he has some responsibility and some skin in the game in doing some of those things. So I think, there's a lot of cool ways. And I think when it comes to teaching your kids, I think there's a lot of cool ways. There's so many teachable moments throughout the day that you can really just, a couple of minutes, have a quick financial conversation. That's good. It's effective. And, it gets the job done and getting them ready to become an adult.
I think that's such a good point that it really has to be the family. I mean, I know I did mention, teaching it in schools, which I think is important. But to your point, the kids are going to learn it from us. As I've gone through my money journey, the term money mindset comes around and they always ask you, well, how did your parents talk about money? What were their emotions around money? And a lot of people have a lot of stress around money and hate bills. And so there's a lot of negativity that comes around the money, but it's really just a skill that you learn. And to your point, if you're wanting to teach your kids and you don't know how, then just go out and start learning and teach them along with you. And another point that I was thinking of, it really comes to the approach. If you're just kind of yelling at your kids saying, you got to appreciate that, versus sitting down with them and talking to them as another adult with an air of curiosity, they're going to be more interested and they're going to appreciate it more. If you're going on a journey with them rather than trying to shove something down their throat.
Right. Absolutely. And I would say, for our members who go through this journey, so many of them get their kids involved, and it is so fun to see the kids get involved with the process and that they're buying in, and the parents are saying, hey guys, we messed this up. Like, hey, we made a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. And we want to talk to you guys about it. We want you guys to be a part of this. We want to share like what we did wrong. And now we're going to work on as a family, getting ourselves out of this. And it's so cool to see the entire family kind of come together. I mean, we have, kids show up on our live meetups every Tuesday. Their parent, they're in the background, we could see them. I mean, it's so cool to see how that all happens. And now, they're seeing their parents take control of their finances, and again, it doesn't always come down to just teaching and talking to them. It really is just about them watching a lot of how you're doing it and how you're handling it. And they're going to be able to take some of that stuff away and use it in their own life.
And when you're secure in your finances, you're less cranky. And so you're going to have a better relationship with your kids. And
oh my, yes.
It creates a much better cycle, a much better environment, and it just improves life all around.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, a recent statistic came out recently that we shared in our podcast this past year is 52% of people who struggle with mental health issues, their number one contribution to those mental health issues is their money stress too. And that's again, over half of the population. And, yes, it is just this immediate boost. And that is the really cool part about this, Carla, is that the payoff numbers that we have people get are great. The savings numbers are great. The numbers are awesome. Like, those are great wins. But what's really cool is just how short of a time people can begin to feel so much better about their financial life by practicing just some simple processes. And we see those things much quicker. Like, for instance, we'll have people who will start this, and within a month or two, they're like, I can't even believe how much better I feel. I haven't really made a lot of great progress yet, but I can't even believe just how much better I feel knowing that I now have a plan. I know exactly what I should be doing. There's no more confusion. I know exactly what's coming in. I know exactly what's going out. I know where we're going, and we're ready to go. And that in itself is empowering. It gives you hope. But, when you don't have that, and you're just this constant cycle of paycheck to paycheck living and crisis to crisis living, constantly playing defense. I mean, it's so hard to ever get any hope. And so, like, that's why I feel, it just always feels like it's always one thing after another when it comes to your money. Well, we need to break that cycle and get you out of that. And so that's a really cool thing to see, where people are just like, I already feel less stressed, even though I haven't really done a whole heck of a lot yet, but I just feel very confident in this plan because, I actually know what I'm supposed to be doing now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to circle back to was when we were talking about changing our money habits and getting some resistance from the rest of the people in our other people in our lives and losing relationships. It reminds me of setting boundaries and how you set them. One of the changes that I made a while back is, instead of going out to lunch with a friend or going out to dinner with a friend. We just go for a walk.
Yeah, there you go.
And they love it. And
Yeah.
the relationship is maintained and even deepened because you're walking, you're talking, you're listening. It's just healthier. You're not spending money, you're getting exercise. And all my friends love it. I haven't had one friend say no to that.
Yeah. And the reality is the other people in your circle are probably struggling just as much as you are. And yeah, they may put up a little bit of a stink of it at first, but the reality is they might come around and say, this is actually going to be good for me too, because I don't have to spend money.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think again, you're never going to make everybody happy. There's no question. You're always going to have a few friends that, you might see that relationship dwindle just a little bit, but I mean, yeah, simple things like that. We see those types of actions where it's just hey, instead of doing this, let's do this. It's less money. And it's awesome. I love that.
Now, how does your business in particular help people if they decided they wanted to get out of debt and they want to work with you and your company and your people? What do they need to do?
Yeah. So, what we suggest first is number one is making sure we're, obviously the right fit. That's why we have the Debt Free Dad podcast. And our big thing here at Debt Free Dad is just that we're normal people. We have 5 of us on our show. And the reason we have 5 of us on our show is to give people different perspectives from different journeys. We have Katie on our show who's single. She started out this process a little over 5 years ago. She was making $13 an hour. That's $13 an hour. A little over 5 years later, she's paid off over $130,000 in debt.
Wow.
On a single income. And so we have her on our show to share her perspective of going through this process as a single person. We have Amber, who's been on my team now for 7 years. She's in Canada. So she speaks from, hey, a different country. It's not just a US problem, by the way. This is an issue that we see across the world. And so she's in Canada and she talks about it from her perspective. We have Chris, who's kind of getting to his retirement years, has gone through this, got out of debt, got himself set up for retirement. And he's speaking it from now an older place where he's like, hey, I'm looking at retirement and I'm glad I did this work and I'm a normal person and here's how you can do it too. And then obviously we got my brother who is the huge, doubter of all of this and has, had that flip and mindset change and also got out of debt. So he speaks from it like, hey, if you're doubting this, hey, I was there too. So I think for a lot of people who are just getting introduced to some of this information, because this whole idea of debt-free, life without payments, I mean, that's kind of a big idea if you've never heard of it before. And the initial reaction for a lot of us when it comes to our finances, walls go up, right? I smell, something that's not right, right? This doesn't sound right. This isn't for me. They're immediately a skeptic, right? And that's totally fine. I was too. So I think, going to listen to the Debt Free Dad podcast or listening to any sort of, personal finance podcast is such a good thing to open up the door of different ideas. In order to become different, you got to start thinking differently. And the way you do that is find people who are doing this stuff different and having success. And so once you go through the podcast, then, if you're interested in working with us further, we've got a lot of cool, really inexpensive resources. We've got a budgeting workshop on our website that's literally $10. We have Financial Harmony for Couples, which is a couples workshop on how to improve your communication around money and personal finance. That's $27. So there's definitely some things that you can get into there. If you're wanting more of a coaching program, that's where we have our paid membership, Roots of Personal Finance, which I am heavily involved in. And I only serve our Roots members. I don't do one-on-one coaching with anyone outside of our program. And this gives people an opportunity to come in and really get not only the education, but also get the support and accountability to keep moving forward. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that are out there with a lot of these self-help programs, is they don't have that hands-on support and accountability. It's like, here's the book, here's the online do-it-yourself course, go through it by yourself, and good luck, have fun. Well, here in Roots, we didn't want to do it that way. I really wanted to create an environment that was like, we're going to show you how to do this, but then I'm going to hold your hand throughout the whole thing. I'm going to be here right beside you. We're not going to leave your side. Oh, and by the way, you got almost 500 other people in this group that are also doing this thing as too. A lot of them are ahead of you. You can ask questions. You can share wins. You can share, hey, things that are tough or challenging. And we're all here to support you. So I think that's the community that we really wanted to build, was just one of not only just education, but really around support and accountability, really being there for people. And, because it's not just about the math. It is about life. And, life is going to come in waves. And you need to have that support and accountability group to kind of keep you focused and to keep you going. And that's what we've really kind of created inside this program.
Now that sounds amazing. And I'll put a link to your podcast, although it's pretty easy to find, Debt Free Dad. Are you on all the platforms?
Yes, we're on all podcast platforms. You can also go to our website, debtfreedad.com. We've got all of our free resources there. Check us out. Obviously, all of our social media channels are listed on the website. So if you want to jump on TikTok, we've been putting a ton of information on TikTok too, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, and all of those types of things as well.
Great, great. I always love to give the audience a call to action at the end of each episode. Or do you have a call to action for people today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if anything that I said resonated with you today, maybe it's how you're feeling, stressed about money. We have a free workshop that you can go right to our website, go to the debtfreedad.com website, click on tools and resources, and you'll see the Life Without Payments workshop. This literally costs you nothing. It's 90 minutes, and we give you worksheets. We give you a lot of great stuff, and it's not just fluff of, just you should get out of debt. Here's the good reasons. Like, you're actually going to go away with actionable items after the workshop that you can get started with right away. So if you're at all interested in just a kind of, hey, I'm just getting started, what are the things that I need to focus on? We're going to give you all of those and those first steps inside that workshop.
Yeah, and we're recording this podcast in December. A lot of people like to make New Year's resolutions. And what a great resolution for 2024 than to be debt free.
Heck yeah, right?
Right.
How amazing would that feel? And that's one of the questions you should ask yourself when you're setting up your goals. How good would it feel to not have as much debt? Or look at your, the amount of debt that you have and say, if I didn't have credit cards, or if I had an amount in savings, like, how good would that feel? That could be the driving force in moving you forward here in the new year.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, I think I've said enough, Carla. I just I want to appreciate the platform and coming on to talk to your audience. I think again, this money stuff is just plays such a ripple effect in your life, and I've gone through so many ups and downs in my life, especially even after being debt free. And I can tell you, getting out of debt, getting your finances improved, even though it's not a fun topic to cover, it's not even fun to work on, but it is and will be some of the best work that you ever do for your life. And I truly believe if you're willing to take responsibility and really, again, hold yourself accountable for the past ways that you've been handling your money, and you're willing to make some changes, you too can have a stress-free financial life. You really can. We see normal everyday people doing this every day. So the sooner you get started, the better things will get.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on and talking about all this.
Yeah. Thanks, Carla. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You too.